the same way the German plan in Lithuania is to allocate a brigade for fast response to deploy, and that's one of the ways we are seeking to go. And we're also helping Estonia develop its own divisional headquarters hand in hand. But we always keep them under review, and we are all waiting for what we call the NATO regional plans that in detail will set out how our forces should be deployed across Europe as part of a bigger comprehensive plan. And that's really important for all of us to be guided on that. On the Iranian drones, the Ukrainians are having success shooting a number of them down. It is the sheer scale. Members will not have missed the similarity between the V1 rockets and the use of this. I would urge the Iranian government to understand that surely supplying Russia to indiscriminately kill civilians, women and children, babies and prams is not an activity that Iran wants to be associated with, and I would urge them to desist as soon as possible. And we are not convinced by the denials from the Iranian government at all that this is not being supplied by them. We will, however, invest and use some of our funding that I've talked about to invest in what other novel capabilities we can find to deploy. In the meantime, we are continually to supply and will step up our supply of our low-velocity missiles into Ukraine to work with the Stormer system and also make sure we can help with detection or electronic warfare schemes. Obviously, the Ukrainian conflict has flushed out technologies that we all need in counter-drone. Members of this House will remember the Gatwick Airport scenario. It is everyone came up with magic solutions. I think my memory said when we actually tested them, nearly none of them did what they said at the tin, on the side of the tin at the time. But we are rapidly helping, and the best of innovation is being used to help the Ukrainians. On the 3% of GDP, number 10 was very clear when I was in Washington that the 3% commitment stood in 2030. I'd be very interested if the Labour Party will match that in 2030. I think it's an important commitment. If they are getting ready for government, as they seem to think they are, Mr Deputy Speaker, I think those are the questions that they will need to answer the British public and the British Armed Forces as they lay out their timetable and their plan. They'll have 2 years to do it, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker. They'll have at least 2 years to do it, so I'm not too worried at all. But I said no. That's when the election, I'm guessing, would be. But that is definitely above my pay grade. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the other issues around how we get them through the winter, we are all working both internationally to see what they can do. The European Union has announced a fund as well, and we'll make sure that we do what we can to help them on critical national infrastructure and energy. Thank you.
Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, Alicia Cairns.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for his calmness and his consistency in his support for our friends in Ukraine. Our leadership on defence spending matters, and it is important we meet defence spending of 2.5% by 2026. Because between now and 2050, it is spending and investing on tech and AI and quantum and new technologies that will allow us to best protect ourselves from hostile states. But I am concerned about this escalation over the Black Sea, and I know he has a close relationship with his Turkish counterpart. So could he please give us an insight into how he's working with our allies in Turkey and Romania to protect air policing?
I'm grateful to my friend. One of the allies I discussed this with was Turkey at the time of it happening. I have a very good and close relationship with the Turkish government. I'll be visiting Turkey next week. They are aware, and as ever, Turkey offered as much assistance as they wished, as we wished, in this process. But we don't consider this a deliberate escalation by the Russian. Our analysis would concur it was a malfunction. However, it is a reminder of quite how dangerous things can be when you choose to use your fighters in the manner that the Russians have done over many periods of time. While this was obviously the release of a weapon, we have seen very, very close flying next to US, UK, NATO assets over the last few years. In one event I was aware of, a Russian fighter went within 15 feet of a NATO aircraft. That is reckless, unnecessary, and puts at risk many people's lives. And I am not also naive. What we saw over the Black Sea, we are incredibly lucky that it didn't become worse. And I'm not trying to trivialise it at all, but we don't consider it a deliberate escalation by the Russian state.
Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I too would like to thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of this statement. And I know my right honourable friend, the member for Ross and Lochaber, appreciates the collegiate way which both he and his staff have acted throughout this crisis. Understandably, much of this attention of this statement will be focused on the incident involving the RAF's surveillance aircraft and the Russian Su-27 fighter, which took place, as we said, in international airspace on a pre-notified flight over the Black Sea last week. And I wish to commend the Secretary of State and the Ministry of Defence for their calm and measured response to a situation which could easily and very quickly have escalated into something far, far more serious. Of course, the situation in Ukraine is serious enough, with Putin now having annexed and declared martial law in the 4 newly annexed territories, giving him a level of control over industry which could possibly now be turned and repurposed into supporting his illegal war effort. And as the Secretary of State has said in recent days, we've seen more Russian war crimes in the targeting of Ukraine's civilians and civilian infrastructure with missiles, rockets and Iranian-made drones, which makes, I believe, Iran directly complicit in war crimes. When will the government follow the example of our US allies and our EU partners in actively pursuing and sanctioning those Iranian companies involved in making those drones, as well as the individuals involved behind those companies? And could he maybe tell us what has been done, if anything, to try and cut off the supply of international components to Iran, which goes into making those components? And finally, echoing what was said from the Labour front bench, as winter approaches and we continue to support militarily, what thought has been given to protecting the civilian population, particularly in terms of, is there scope to send more generators or specialist electricity equipment to help keep the lights on and to keep the heating on for the Ukraine civilians this winter?
I'm grateful to the honourable member. His last point is incredibly important. We already had quite significant work from the Department of Health in this conflict about getting medical supplies, but I think he prompts me to see what we can do in a more international coordinated manner for exactly that. Now, I am aware of it, but I would potentially write to him with the full detail. But he is right. This is going to be a tough winter, and I think we need to make sure. I'd like to join him on the calmness of the RAF. They have, incredibly professional men and women doing an incredible job, not only here. Some of those same aircraft and the P-8s from Lossiemouth go out and protect us in the north, the very high north, from aggression and Russian activity, and also obviously in Scotland it is often where Russia does enter our airspace with its long-range bombers and patrols, a habit they didn't give up after the Cold War and still continue to do so. And I think here is the difference. Here we were in international airspace, and I think that is something to remark. But we try, even though, and keep a professional manner with the Russian. It is important that we maintain that professional link with the Russian Ministry of Defence and recognise that we can have those important engagements in times like this.
Sir John Whittingdale.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Given the extraordinary success of Ukrainian armed forces in pushing back Russian troops, does my right friend agree that there is a danger that Putin may consider escalating the conflict? And while attention has focused on the potential use of battlefield nuclear weapons, will he agree that any use of chemical or biological weapons equally represents a red line which Putin must not cross?
Quite right.
The OPWC, the convention that we are all signed up to and indeed viewed as some of the key anchor countries to upholding that, which saw us, obviously, if you remember, the use of chemical weapons in Syria, see a number of actions, including us and France, take military action, is incredibly important. A convention to uphold, breaking that taboo or allowing that to be successfully broken would have severe consequences for all of us. In the same way, the messaging on the nuclear use, chemical weapons would lead to severe consequences for the Russian state for it to do so, and we would urge that none of these are resorted to. On President Putin's position, he has obviously made a number of speeches, annexed illegally parts of countries that are already still full of Ukrainian forces, and his ambitions don't seem to match the realities on the ground. I think the key here is to message to him that we are interested in helping Ukraine succeed in Ukraine in defeating Russia's illegal invasion in Ukraine. If he understands what that is about, then he should be able to calibrate his response in order to effectively orderly leave Ukraine, and we can start the process of trying to rebuild that amazing country and for Russia to be held accountable for its crimes.
Kevin Jones.
Thank you. Can I thank the Defence Secretary for his statement and his leadership through this difficult time? Can I also thank the members of our armed forces who are supporting our efforts in Ukraine and also in Eastern Europe, and also the civil servants behind them in his own department? He mentioned in his statement about the Russians targeting drone attacks on civilians, but what has become very clear over the last few weeks as Ukrainians have gained ground is the war crimes that have taken place against civilians and members of the armed forces in Ukraine. Could you just explain what expertise and support we're giving to Ukrainians to actually log evidence and actually get that to be able to bring those individuals to account?
I'm grateful to that, Honourable Member. Earlier on, when we had the first, obviously, exposure of war crimes in Bucha, not far outside of Kyiv, a group of us, including the United Kingdom, but alongside the Canadians, started that process of gathering evidence for the ICC. My colleague, the now former Home Secretary, was then the Attorney General. She visited Ukraine herself and worked with the then prosecutor. I think the Red Cross is also clearly engaged in gathering that information. I think their biggest challenge is the sheer scale of the amount of evidence they are now finding and uncovering. And it goes to the anxiousness of our friends in the Baltic states that Russia does not invade and occupy with any civility or regard to the people that it is decided to occupy. It seems to destroy everything in its path. And if you are a small Baltic state, your worry is you don't have time for the rest of us to get there. It is why we are committed to a battle group in Estonia, because if you give him time or Russia time, there won't be very much left when you get there. That's why we have to send a message that this course is unacceptable.
Robert Cords.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the Secretary of State for his calm yet robust response to the Rivet Joint Sukhoi incident, which is, of course, of great concern. And I pay tribute as well to the calmness and professionalism of the RAF crews in that incident. Would the Secretary of State commit to continue to keep under review the adequacy of the fighter forces that we have available, bearing in mind the escort duties he's now referred to, as well as the ongoing combat air patrol, air policing duties that there is on NATO's Eastern Front in any event?
Yes, look, making sure we have more availability and more of fighter aircraft capability in this country has been one of my priorities on the first day, almost the first day in taking over the job. I sent a letter to the Chief of the Air Staff saying his number one priority was to improve the fighter pilot pipeline. There's no point buying planes if there's no one to fly them, and it is incredibly important that we get that. Of course, with the new type, the F-35, one of the challenges is you don't growing instructors, it's a catch-22. You've got to have enough pilots in the planes to grow the instructor body, but if you don't have enough pilots in the first place, how do you do that? So we are getting there. It is improving. In the Typhoon is proving its worth every single week. I went to the ceremony to hand over to Qatar the next iteration of the Typhoon, a formidable aircraft, and hopefully one that will be bought by many other countries around the world.
Mary Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Secretary of State elaborate on, because he touched on it earlier, about the help that we're providing, such as we talked about equipment, in particular, whether he could tell us what we are doing in providing generators, energy generators, such as small diesel generators, to ensure that key services such as hospitals or water cleaning plants keep going, because given Russia's attack on civilian infrastructure.
Yes. So first of all, on non-lethal military aid, that is collected and corralled in the same place we do with military, through the international donor cell based in Germany. That is a multinational cell staffed predominantly by military and civil servants who collect the ask from Ukraine, and then we try and match it with donors. Now, that is predominantly in the military aid and the non-lethal military aid, but that includes generators, field hospitals, medical stuff for that, but predominantly that is on their war effort. I will make sure that we write to you with the broader detail of what other assistance is happening. I visited Ukraine about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they were in a pretty good mindset and their ability to see through the winter. But of course, the use of mass drones from Iranian drones will have an effect if it continues, and we must make sure that doesn't catch up. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I did forget to ask the question about on the sanctions to the member of the Scottish National Party. What I would say, my understanding is the Foreign Secretary will be making a statement on that in the near future.
Andrew Bridgen.
Mr. Deputy Speaker,
fucking hell, guys! I actually can't do this. Not seen him come out, Anita. He went in there a wee while ago at the Prime Minister's invitation. She asked him to come up here, which I think is number 10 trying to tell us all to calm down a bit. This isn't necessarily Sir Graham Brady going in there to tell the Prime Minister the game's up and she needs to go. However, the mood of the party, from my judgment speaking to Tory MPs over the past few hours and the past few days, is incredibly bleak. There are a growing number of MPs who are just banging their heads off tables now, saying we've no idea how this is going to continue, it's totally untenable, how can the Prime Minister win any authority back? The question over the next few hours is whether that leads to something. And I know that might sound like a slightly ridiculous hypothetical question, but there's two things that you can't forget today when all the speculation about the Prime Minister's future swirls. One is, nobody has decided who should succeed her. There's a big disagreement among different wings of the Conservative Party about who that should be. Secondly, Tory MPs who want to get rid of her don't necessarily know how they want to do it. One of the options is to create a system whereby MPs would just choose their next leader and forgo any vote of the membership, the Conservative membership, on their next leader. But that's not been agreed yet, and there are some saying, calm down a bit, let's not move too fast too soon. So we're keeping an eye out for Sir Graham Brady. We're trying to find out what's gone on in that meeting. My sense is that it's a sign of how grim the picture is that he's in there, but I also get the impression he's not in there just now to tell the Prime Minister it's over. Yes, that is what a lot of Conservative MPs are working out. They've been doing it for a few days actually. The kind of question, and I think this might be happening certainly amongst a small number of MPs I've spoken to, some who were maybe prepared to give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt, saw everything that happened yesterday, the Home Secretary's resignation, the chaos in Parliament with votes last night, now the threat to remove the whip from some MPs. They see that and they think, actually, this chaos is just going to go on and on and on. It keeps happening. It's not going to go away. So the question that I think is crucial today is, have any MPs changed their mind overnight? And does that lead to more who are now saying, it's game over, we need to push the button, Liz Truss needs to go? There isn't a scientific answer to that. I have spoken to some who are in that place, and I think that's maybe indicative that that could be happening. But the truth is, Anita, it's very, I'm going to use that word that we use quite a lot at Westminster, it's febrile at the moment. There are a lot of people weighing up what happens next. Nothing's certain at this stage. yeah, I think it very well could be. I mean, certainly amongst Liz Truss's critics, it made the picture even worse. You know, my phone was red hot last night with furious Tory MPs talking about how much of a shambles the whole situation was. I suppose the crux of the question at the moment, just as the door opens and someone wanders out, I can always tell because there are photographers who pick their cameras up and give us a bit of a heads up that something's happening. The crux of the question is, did what happened yesterday push enough Tory MPs into a place where they feel they have to act right away? Now, that is the question that the Conservative MPs I've been chatting with off the record this morning are asking. It's the question I think that Liz Truss will be probably putting to Sir Graham Brady at the moment. What is the mood of the Conservative Party? Has it moved so decisively that this game is up? My impression is the party has moved against the Prime Minister, yes. The question she will be weighing up in that building right now, is it irretrievable? And if it is irretrievable, does she walk now? We're speculating at the moment. We don't know the answer to that, but it is a live question. That's fine. I don't know what we're going to do about this level though, because if it's not just a bit of a difference. It's like if you turn it down, I can't hear the programme, and if you speak at your normal level, I'm going to go deaf. Sorry. Guys, is someone playing with the volume? I don't know what's going on, but it's going from really low to like loud enough to deafen me. Fine. I don't know how to sort it, but I can't use it like this.
Gone completely?
No, it's just so loud.
This is
Just coming out of here instead of going to the right part. Is that why we can hear?
Nick. That's what we're missing. You've got another box. You should still be able to turn that working match, so to speak. It doesn't have any effect on the or a jack out. The gallery should be able to do that.
Yeah.
Really dark.
That's fine by me, yeah. Yeah, that's maybe slightly down, slightly down. Yeah.
It's a one coming from there, or you're right for the one.
Guys, this is just fucking unusable. This is completely unusable. We need to sort this. I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not.
Yeah, they are asking, it's not a priority now, but they're just asking how will that extra thing get back to normal later on.
What, this one?
Stuff that they ran over just now.
Just need to, whoever's the last person
I
here.
presume one of them, that'll probably be back, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
What?
but there might be from here or up to there.
It's most likely to be me, to be honest, coming back as the producer after a break, so
Don't plug you there.
happy to.
Sorry, I know this is nobody's fault, but it just needs sorted because it's not usable. Thank you very much.
No. Do you know what? I also don't really like. Yeah, I feel a bit like dizzy. Like my back just here starting to hurt. Is that an old
You feel
age?
dizzy?
Yeah. I've just been
You
sticking
eaten?
it out. No, not yet.
Why don't you go and get food?
Because I finished in like 20 minutes.
For the day?
No.
Who's taking over?
ITN. I'll be back in. Actually, no, it's not even ITN. Why is it ITN? Then Emily told me that Rebecca's coming to relieve me. Why is it?
Nothing on the report now, so no problem.
Fiona Harvey.
I don't understand.
So I'm not getting anything just now.
No, I think
There's nothing. No, I can't do this.
Nick, do you feel like you need a producer?
I feel like I need food.
Have you not eaten anything?
Nope. Since 5 o'clock this morning.
Let me say, I'll say if Rebecca does come, can she bring food?
It's alright.
What would it be? Just like a banana?
Car.
Have you got confidence in the Prime Minister? Is this the end? How long does she have left?
Did you hear John Craig?
No.
Full crisis mode now. I think that's the third time Berry's been into it.
It is.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Jake Berry's driver is very fast.
Very fast.
Did that this morning as well.
How was it? It just feels super dramatic. I really like it.
She's been lit, Nick. What do you want me to do? Give me that. Got it. No.
Let's get a little bit more now from our political correspondent, Alex Forsyth, who is here in Westminster, just over away from where I am.
Put your earpiece on there. Get your
Alex,
shit.
so last tally I had was 13 MPs publicly saying they want the Prime Minister to go. Is that your understanding now? It's 12:51.
Should have it.
Yeah. Could you turn it up a wee bit? I'm actually not being, I'm not being picky here. It genuinely seems to be all or nothing. A wee bit, but I'd keep going if you can. Yeah, it's a bit better. Keep going. No. Can you hold on a sec? Actually, would that raise it even further?
What?
Does that control what I'm?
No, that don't control you.
It's still really low.
Sounds low. That on full. That on full.
Sorry? Yeah, it's on full. I mean, I can't really hear it, to be honest. I don't know what's going on. Let's just stick with it. We'll just have to live with it. Can I just say, having you guys exactly where you are is the best thing, because when you put your cameras up, I know someone's coming out. Yeah.
I know we can't go, but they're going to have to set up.
Hello, the one. I'm hearing okay. I don't know what's going on. Nothing personal, I promise. Thank you. So I hear. If someone could send me the headline sequence and what comes before and after, it would be helpful. Not essential, but helpful. Okay. Yeah.
Thursday, the 2nd of November, is to be determined by the Backbench Business Committee, and Friday, the 4th of November, the House will not be sitting.
Madam Leader of the House.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Leader of the House for the forthcoming business. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, where on earth do I start? Where? I mean, do we even still have a Prime Minister? This is the morning, well, now it's the afternoon after the morning after the night before, with the government seemingly falling to pieces before our very eyes. As some of their own backbenchers said yesterday, they ought to be ashamed of themselves. With a Home Secretary resigning amidst discussions of national security, a government seemingly unable even to organise against our motion to ban fracking, forced early morning hours clarifications from Downing Street, all in a day's work for this absolute disgrace of a government party who are simply unfit to govern. They are dragging this country's reputation through the mud, and the British people will never forgive them for it. British people are looking to the government for answers on how they're going to pay for their mortgage or their rent or their bills, which the government have sent sky high when they crashed the economy. Instead, chaos. Mr Deputy Speaker, Parliament ought to be a model workplace, so could the Leader confirm that reports of bad behaviour in the lobbies last night or outside the lobby will be investigated? Could she please put on record that in her view there is no place for intimidation and bullying on the parliamentary estate? And on the actual votes themselves, Mr Deputy Speaker, it's come to my attention there is a discrepancy between the number of votes recorded in the no lobby, which were read out in the chamber, and the numbers later published on the voting lists. So is the Leader aware of any of her party's members who perhaps didn't want to vote against our motion, but to avoid controversy with their whips, marched through the lobby but didn't scan their pass, and therefore avoid publication of their names? Could she also clarify whether yesterday's vote was a confidence vote or not? Downing Street said it was. Then a number 10 special advisor told the Climate Minister to say that it wasn't, which he duly did from this dispatch box, causing confusion on his own side. And at 1:30 this morning, number 10 suggested in fact that it was. And then the Transport Secretary told Kay Burley a few hours ago that it wasn't. We know the Prime Minister is infamous for her U-turns. This is beyond a joke. If it was a vote of confidence, when will the Prime Minister be removing the whip from her rebels? I also notice that the government has pulled our next opposition day. I can't think why, after yesterday, that they might do that. Are they punishing us for their chaos and their incompetence last night? Is the leader aware of Standing Order 14, which allocates 17 days to the leader of the official opposition party? They are falling behind, so will the government be giving us an opposition day on the week commencing the 7th of November? Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm glad the leader actually has some business to announce, given their complete inability to function. As well as chaos, we've got a raft of dropped legislation, broken promises, unmet manifesto commitments, and she can't blame the British people for asking, what is the point of this government? Don't just take it from me. The former Home Secretary mentioned the very thing in her letter. She's raising concerns about the government breaking key pledges to voters, failing to honour their manifesto commitments. Someone had their Weetabix, or was it tofu, for breakfast yesterday. Perhaps the leader could provide some clarity on what further broken promises she's referring to. Can I also ask that the government sends ministers to answer urgent questions who can actually provide answers? Many important questions on national security went unanswered this morning in the urgent question relating to the sacking of the Home Secretary. Sorry, resignation, was it? Mr Deputy Speaker, out of touch, out of ideas, unable to govern, too busy trying to get through an hour by hour, minute by minute, worsening Tory psychodrama, rather than focusing, I see it's happening in front of my very eyes, on the serious issues facing all our constituents, not just mine, theirs as well. They've crashed the economy, they've left working people to pick up the bill, and now they're falling apart. This is a Tory crisis made in Downing Street. They're letting everyone down. The Prime Minister has clearly lost the confidence of her party, and her party's lost the confidence of the country. It is time for a general election so that a Labour government can deliver a fresh start for the British people.
Leader.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I start by thanking the Speaker for his statement at the start of business, which I do wholeheartedly endorse. We have ways of organising ourselves in a party system in this place, but ultimately we are all individuals making judgments about what is in the best interests of the country and our constituents. And sometimes votes are about more than the issue that has been debated. Last night's Labour motion was an attempt to seize control of proceedings, and we all know that that was deliberately done to enable campaigns today about members' views on fracking, and to spark the usual social media outrage, and I know that Twitter has taken down some accounts today. This is standard operating procedure by Labour, and many members on this side of the House have worked hard to ensure that fracking is rightly not imposed on their community, and it is by their efforts that fracking is not in their community, and it is the government's policy that to allow fracking where there is consent. And if we want to take the temperature down in this place, I suggest we take the temperature down outside of this place too. I'm happy to go on record to say that I am against bullying both in Parliament and outside it too, and I hope that is the view of all members of this House. The country does need stability and it needs calm. And I'm glad to say that is the effect that the Chancellor is having. Market functioning has improved, borrowing costs have been lowered, and the pound is strengthening. But there is more to do. Despite the very volatile global economic conditions, the economy remains resilient. Unemployment is at its lowest level for nearly 50 years, and the UK is forecast to have the fastest growth in the G7 this year. Elsewhere, good work is going on in government too, in contrast to the picture painted by the Honourable Lady opposite. Just this week, the Lord Chancellor has opened up the legal aid system to make it easier for victims of domestic abuse to get access to free legal aid and representation. We've had huge wins in the Department for Trade, 100 million trade win for the drinks industry and huge infrastructure project wins. We've announced nearly 800 million to support research centres with breakthrough new treatments, 180 million to support children's development in their early years. DWP has launched a new service which helps businesses support members of their workforce who have a disability or become sick. Earlier this week, we passed the Energy Prices Bill, removing the worry for households and businesses of their energy costs. And we are introducing the Transport Strikes Bill, providing protection for the travelling public who rely on rail services to get to work or go about their daily lives. I hope that the Labour Party will back us and the fed-up commuters to protect those services. Honourable members opposite have been running around saying in office but not in power all this week, and I think that's probably a more accurate description of Labour's relationship with their trade union paymasters. We are getting on with the job, and further business will be announced in the usual way.
And representing the chair of the Backbench Business Committee, Bob Blackman.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. The chairman of the Backbench Business Committee, the honourable member for Gateshead, is indisposed, so he's asked me to report back. In addition to the business that my right honourable friend has announced, on Tuesday morning there will be a debate in Westminster Hall on baby loss and safe staffing in maternity care, and in Westminster Hall next Thursday there will be debates on Colleges Week and World Menopause Day, all subjects of which I think colleagues will wish you to debate. And on Tuesday the 1st of November, provided the Madam Deputy Speaker agrees, there will be a debate on the importance of religious education in modern Britain. Mr Deputy Speaker, we have a queue of debates requiring chamber time, so I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for announcing further dates for the Backbench Business Committee, but can I also say that we are short of debates that will go into Westminster Hall on Thursdays. So if colleagues wish to get a debate from us, I would encourage them to apply for Westminster Hall debates. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, on Monday it's Diwali. Hindus, Sikhs and Jains will be celebrating Diwali in the time-honoured fashion. So can I call on my right honourable friend to join with me in wishing everyone Shubh Diwali and Nutan Vashna Abhinandan for Wednesday and the Hindu New Year.
Well, I'm very happy to join with my honourable friend in wishing everyone happy Diwali and thank him for the update that he has given to this House on backbench business and stressing the importance of getting those debates. The topics, the issues that colleagues have put forward show that this is a much helpful innovation and I would urge colleagues to apply for those debates.
Deirdre Brock.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and I too wish everyone a very happy Diwali for when it comes. It's good to see the leader still in her place, Mr Deputy Speaker, but perhaps this is our last exchange, for who knows who next will be asked to close their eyes, think of Britain and become the next Prime Minister. Given the jacket of the current incumbent is clearly on a sugary peg, I think she should go for it. The 1922 committee chair has entered number 10 reportedly just now. So, if it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. Or it may be that after the latest developments in the government's implosion, including a resignation from a great office of state, still the former Home Secretary fulfills that dream of making the front page of the Telegraph, that the Leader's Party is running out of candidates for the job and she'll simply assume it. Assuming, that is, she still wants to inherit this Icarus economy, so spectacularly burned and crashed by the government, leading to IMF and Bank of England interventions, as if the UK was a rudderless economy with no one at the wheel. Which, come to think of it, does seem to be the course Britain is set on now, Mr Deputy Speaker, with all of us having been treated as economic laboratory mice trapped within the deluded constructs of libertarian think tanks. A debate on some sort of compulsory training for government ministers on the basics of economics might be helpful. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, many of us in here and outside this place are finding it a bit of a struggle to keep up with events. So can we have a statement, please, on exactly who the current members of the government are just now? And I believe the government's bringing in legislation today mounting further attacks on trade unions and introducing a minimal level of service guarantee for the rail network. Surely it's time we brought in a minimum level of service guarantee for Westminster governments. And while we're at it, a debate on molestation, reflections and intimidations, as outlined in Erskine May, might prove useful. In the 18th century, as I'm sure the Bayes Secretary knows only too well, insulting or menacing members or trying by force to influence them in their conduct in Parliament was roundly condemned and considered a contempt. The time is clearly ripe for refresher courses. Look, Mr Speaker, Mr Deputy Speaker, the temptation is always to have a bit of fun with these weekly jousts over the political soap opera, but there's in fact very little room for amusement this week. I am all too conscious of the millions of people who are still looking to this place to provide them with some reassurance. Those in charge have a clear idea of the problems they face and know what to do to sort them. All four nations are looking on aghast at the shambles this government has created for itself, but far more seriously for all of our citizens. The attractions of an independent Scotland, free of this burrock of a place, grow ever greater. General election now.
Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm actually quite cheered by what the Honourable Lady says, because I'd always thought the expression was close your eyes and think of England. Given that she asked us to close our eyes and think of Britain, I think I'm starting to make some progress with the Honourable Lady. I'm sorry that she didn't mention any of the economic support that we have put through this House this week to the citizens in Scotland. But I have to tell her, as we prepare for a statement on the 31st of October, there is a policy being touted that I'm afraid to say would cost every single person in Scotland £2,184. I don't know what the Right Honourable Lady's views would be on that matter, whether she would be for or against a policy that would take £2,184 off every individual in Scotland. The Honourable Lady looks confused. Let me help her out. She is for such a policy because that is the price of her divided policies.
Sir Roger Gay. Roger.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, one of the finer legacies of the last administration and of the 2019 Conservative Election Manifesto was our commitment to animal welfare. Would my right honourable friend confirm that that commitment is still firmly in place, and would she therefore find time as swiftly as possible to bring forward the remaining stages of the Kept Animals Bill?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for reminding us of the track record we have in this area. As an independent nation, we are now able to go further than ever on animal welfare. We have banned the live export of animals for fattening and slaughter. We have legislated for animal sentience, and we are building an animal welfare into our independent trade policy. Other business will be announced in the usual way, but the honourable gentleman has those assurances, and he should be confident when he looks at our track record.
Chris Bryant.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I want to ask about brain injury, because yesterday morning I hosted a round table here with lots of people who've been engaged in the issue around concussion in sports. You may have seen recent stories about rugby players, football players who are suffering from depression, anxiety, a whole series of different mental health complaints, and many have suicidal or dementia problems resulting from subconcussive events. So not even when they've been knocked out, but repeated shaking or minor blows to the head. Can we have a debate on what the government's going to do about this, when we're going to have proper protocols for all sports so that we protect every single child, especially as their brain is developing?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising that. I will certainly raise this with both the Department for Health and also the Department for Education as well, but he will know how to apply for a debate.
Nikki Aiken.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Currently, organisations like the government-funded Energy Savings Trust are providing excellent advice to households up and down the country on how to save energy and also then save money on their bills. I think it's time that we also did similar advice for businesses, and I'm working with business leaders throughout the two cities, including Kate Nichols of UK Hospitality and Kate Hart from Central London Business Improvement Districts on this matter. Would my right honourable friend join me in encouraging businesses across the country to take steps to be more energy efficient, and does she agree with me that perhaps we should be looking at the House of Commons on its energy consumption too?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her excellent question, which I shall make sure that the Secretary of State hears, and to thank her. The campaign she describes, I think, will be extremely useful to many businesses. Quite often, small differences in behaviour can lead to massive savings in energy, but also business costs as well.
Anna McMurran.
Thank you. What I witnessed yesterday in the entrance to the voting lobby was an absolute disgrace. A clearly, visibly distressed Tory MP being forced against his will and bullied, manhandled into the voting chamber. So I know this government is disintegrating in front of our very eyes, but this is a challenge to democracy. Will the Leader of the House make an urgent statement against this sort of bullying and support the investigation that is now clearly needing to take place?
Well, I would refer the Honourable Lady to what I said at the start of my remarks today. The Speaker made a statement which I completely support what he said. Of course, everyone in this chamber would condemn bullying, both, I hope, outside of this chamber, but also within it too. But what I would say to the Honourable Lady is the situation is not helped if people don't make specific allegations. Any member of this House who has seen bad conduct or who has been the victim of bad conduct must be able to come forward and report that and it be investigated. I'm not aware of any such substantiated allegations at all. And I'm afraid I would say to the Honourable Lady, if she wants to help the situation, think about what she could do to assist that situation. And I would ask her to check that against her behaviour today.
Well, I know.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I ask my right honourable friend if she will find time in this chamber for a debate about the modernisation of the land registry? Currently, if an identity thief steals your identity and uses it to transfer the title of your house, there is a very protracted, long-winded mechanism that ends up in a tribunal, which may well at the end of it not see your house returned to you. This has happened to one of my constituents. He has lost a home that he spent many months investing in time, in cash, and indeed in his own hard labour renovating it, only to let it to tenants who stole his identity and then used it to transfer the title. He is struggling to get that property back, and it strikes me that the land registry procedures, where it's simply impossible to transfer a title back, are outdated and very much in need of updating.
Well, I have to say, I've heard about the case that the Right Honourable Lady has been working on behalf of her constituents. It's absolutely appalling. To be robbed of any property is bad enough, but one's home, which you have put your heart and soul into, you may have brought up a family there, it's really incredibly distressing. I know that my Right Honourable friend has been doing a huge amount to put a rocket up the land registry. I want to assist her in doing that, and I will write to the Secretary of State, but she also will know there are questions on Tuesday and she should raise that there.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I've raised concerns recently with the Home Office and the Ministry of Defence about a 13-year-old girl living in my constituency, separated from her family in Afghanistan, despite assurances that they were given at the time when they assisted the forces in Afghanistan. So I wonder if the Leader could advise me on how I might go about raising this with the Minister directly, and whether we could have some time in the chamber to debate the ARAP scheme and its progress.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about that case. The Honourable Lady will know how she can apply for a debate, and she may wish to work with other colleagues to do that. But if she passes the details of that case to my office, I will write on her behalf and ask for a meeting with the Minister.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
My right honourable friend may have heard many of the tributes which were paid to the late Dame Angela Lansbury, who sadly passed away last week. Most of those tributes focused on her acting and singing prowess and, of course, her legendary character Jessica Fletcher in Murder, She Wrote. But is my right honourable friend aware that Angela Lansbury was one of the first champions of the fight against AIDS? And particularly in the 1980s, when many celebrities shied away from the issue, she was in the vanguard of fundraising. And she famously said, "We will never give up on the fight until the fight is won." But does my right honourable friend accept that that fight will not be won unless the United Kingdom and others come forward to replenish the global fund to fight AIDS, because that is the only way in which we are going to achieve Dame Angela's objective?
Well, I thank my right honourable friend for and join with him in the tribute that he pays to the late Angela Lansbury. I did know that about her. She was a stalwart and someone that really changed views towards that particular disease. I can tell him that the government has restated its commitment to the Global Fund, and we will make an announcement on our pledge in the coming weeks.
Stephen Doughty.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. The problem with the chaos in the government is that, of course, it delays getting answers to real-world problems that our constituents are facing. And one of those that my constituents in the Hayes Point apartments in Surrey have been struggling to get an answer on is when they will get payments from the Energy Bills Support Scheme, because they come under what's called the Alternative Fund, which is for those who don't have a direct relationship with an electricity supplier. I've been trying to get answers from the Business Department on this. They haven't had their money like others have up and down the country. Could she urgently chase an answer and a statement from the Secretary of State for Business Energy on this, so that they know when they're going to get their support with their energy bills?
Thank you. Well, this support is enormous and it is most welcome, but people need to know how the schemes work, and I know the honourable gentleman appreciates that they are complex schemes. I will certainly follow this up with the department and ensure that members are given information that is easily understandable for their constituents.
Anna Firth.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Look, this weekend, Southend came together to commemorate my successor, Sir David Amess. So with that in mind, would my right honourable friend agree to a debate on the transformative effect of music on those with learning difficulties and disabilities? In Southend, we have not only the Love to Sign Choir, but the International Music Man Project, recording its first ever single today with the Royal Marines brand. Will my right honourable friend and the whole House help make this the Christmas #1 for all that it does to help those with learning difficulties overcome barriers and to the benefit of us all, and overcome huge challenges in their life?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this and paying tribute to our dearly missed late colleague, Sir David Amess. The Music Man Project is an incredible organisation. The Christmas single that she mentions is available now to download. Their first live performance is tonight at the Painted Hall in Greenwich, accompanied by the Royal Marines band. And I have to say, I was very privileged to go to their first rehearsal, and it was one of the most amazing experiences I've had. I have video of the effect of these two organisations coming together, and it was an amazing thing and the lasting legacy of our late colleague.
Here. Barry Sheeran.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I know that the Leader of the House is new to the role, and I know she has a great combative style, but I hope she'll reflect on what she said to my honourable friend, the member for Cardiff North, because I think she was very unfair in her response. But on forthcoming business, she knows that all of us will be very busy as members of Parliament, as I am in Huddersfield, working with a whole network of charities, local people, local organisations, because it's going to be a long, hard winter for so many people who are not going to be able to afford to heat the house, not able to feed the family. And support groups will have to be organised. Could she make sure that we get the right ministers here, DCLG or whichever, to talk about how the government can help us with the resources to build that network and resources so that we can provide that food, provide those warm spaces, and so MPs could actually roll up their sleeves and help.
Well, on that latter point, I can certainly raise this with the key departments involved. So much of this is about sharing good practice. There will be organisations that will be working across several areas around the country, and picking up good practice and sharing it is incredibly important.
Justin Tomlinson.
Drama, suspense, whodunit. No, Mr. Speaker, not here, but in cinemas up and down the country. Great entertainment, key part of our social fabric. And for the whips, an opportunity for people to be somewhere where they can turn their phones off. Will the Leader of the House find time to debate the importance of the exclusivity window for new films in this changing entertainment landscape?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his very witty question. I shall certainly raise this with the relevant department.
George Hart.
The Leader of the House will be aware that one of the important principles of our constitutional arrangements is the principle of the mandate. Given that the government's mandate derived from the last general election manifesto has now either been abandoned or exhausted, isn't it really time that we had a general election?
Yeah.
When it would have been in this country's interest to have a general election when this Parliament was in paralysis due to Brexit before the 2019 general election, the Honourable Gentleman's Party blocked it. So I'm not going to take any lessons to him on that front. We stood on a manifesto that we are delivering, but that work is not yet done, and we will continue to deliver the manifesto that gave us this sizable majority.
Brickcliffe.
Speaker, grassroots clubs and sports are vital to communities like mine in Hyndburn and Hassenden. I've got some fantastic clubs like Huncourt United and the Wildcats, but they do need support to make sure that they've got the vital screen spaces that they need to train, but also the funding to exist. So could we allow a debate in government time on how we continue to support grassroots clubs and sports?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this important issue. I shall certainly flag what she has said today with the relevant department. She will know how to apply to a debate, and I think it will be a very well attended one if she secures it.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Pavement parking is a massive problem in South Manchester. It's a difficult problem to solve. We need the power that London has to introduce a default ban. Now, last week, the Secretary of State, who happily has just joined the front bench, said it was a priority for her and would bring forward the legislation we need as soon as parliamentary time allows. So can I ask the leader to work with her colleague to make that happen? I think it would be a relatively simple thing to do and would be widely welcomed.
Yeah. Well, to save my civil servants some work and some paper, I shall put it on record to Hansard that I will ensure that the relevant Secretary of State hears what the honourable gentleman has raised.
John Lamont.
Nicola Sturgeon confirmed this week she's pushing for a hard border between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom. The SNP's new economic policies would cost businesses a fortune and recklessly risk people's jobs. So does the Leader of the House agree we should have a debate on this issue so the SNP can finally tell the people of Scotland the truth about the enormous economic damage that Nicola Sturgeon's plan for a hard border would do to Scotland?
Well, I thank my honourable friend. Yes, I'm afraid this is the latest wheeze from the SNP to risk jobs and burn taxpayers' money. Let us not forget, this is the party that during the pandemic hired a testing firm at the cost of £10 million that promptly furloughed all of its staff. In fairness to them, they did try and guarantee some jobs. They paid a company the tune of £5 million per job and then failed to secure any of those jobs. Audit Scotland said of the Scottish Government it had no framework to deal with the private sector. And of course, the most spectacular is the fact that they have paid the cost of 24 ferries for just 2 vessels.
Peter Hobhouse.
Mr Deputy Speaker, MPs should be allowed to vote according to their judgment and without being harassed or bullied. Can she clarify what happened in the No lobby according to her observations? And does she agree with me that yesterday's event throws a very bad light on the professionalism of this our Parliament?
Well, can I say that I agree with the Honourable Lady, and as I set out in my earlier remarks, we have a way of organising ourselves in this place, but we are elected by our constituents to look after their interests and the interests of this country. I have to say that I was in the lobby last night. I did not see any of that has been reported, but there are processes for reporting these things and for looking at them. And I'm sure if you will have heard Mr Speaker's statement earlier today, I think he is right. That is the right approach.
Celine Saxby.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Nitrous oxide capsules have littered North Devon beaches this summer as more and more people are using them for recreational purposes, despite the risks such as damage to the lungs, halting breathing and slowing the heart to a dangerous level. Manufacturers this week have called for further restrictions on its purchase. Can I ask if the Government may consider this recommendation and restrict sales for recreational use?
Can I thank my honourable friend for shining a spotlight on this important issue, and clearly an issue of great concern to her constituents. Given concerns about the use of nitrous oxide, particularly by young people, the former Home Secretary sought advice from the Independent Advisory Council on the misuse of drugs, and when they respond, the Government will consider their advice carefully and inform the House.
There's a huge problem across my constituency of youths razzing around the streets on motorbikes, sometimes stolen, riding without helmets, pulling stunts, putting other road users and pedestrians in danger. I was accompanied by Councillor Alison Gwynn to a meeting with Chief Superintendent Davis on Friday. The Denton South councillors Reid, Newton and Naylor had a packed public meeting on Monday about this, and Audenshaw councillors Smith and Martin are still picking up the consequences of a 16-year-old boy coming off his bike and sadly losing his life. This is serious. It comes down to a very resource-intensive programme to tackle it. Can we have a statement from the new Home Secretary that this government takes these issues seriously and will give Greater Manchester Police and other police forces the tools that they need to tackle this scourge on our streets?
Well, I'm very sorry to hear about that situation, and particularly that tragic loss of life. The honourable gentleman is right. It's a whole community approach to this. I will certainly make sure what he has said today is flagged with the Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Chancellor of the Exchequer's statement earlier this week, which set out a realistic approach to dealing with our financial challenges. But my right honourable friend will be aware that that causes concerns about funding for a whole range of schemes. My 2 local authorities are very concerned about their levelling up bids. Can the Leader of the House give an assurance that when the Chancellor makes his statement on the 31st, it will be accompanied by clarification as to existing projects?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this. I know the huge amount of work he has done on the levelling up agenda in his constituency. I will certainly make sure the Chancellor has heard what he has said today, and I will also make sure that the Secretary of State for Levelling Up has heard his words too.
Oswald.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. It's estimated that between 2.5% and 4% of people, adults and children, have ADHD. Neurodiversity matters, and all of us benefit the more that that's realised and understood. So I wonder if the Leader of the House would agree to a debate in government time on the importance of fostering greater knowledge and awareness and understanding of neurodiverse conditions, and thank the groups working hard to provide support and information, especially during October, which is ADHD Awareness Month.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this important point, and I do join with her in thanking the large number of organisations who do work to ensure that families have the advice and support that they need. I shall certainly flag this with the number of departments that will be looking at this particular issue, and I would encourage her as well to raise it in questions.
Bob Seeley.
Speaker, I welcome very much the minimum service levels which are going to be outlined in upcoming legislation. Can the Leader of the House please tell me if she would support, as part of that, minimum service levels on lifeline services such as the Solent ferries, where we have both the RMT and Unite?
I heard approval noises coming from my colleague on the front bench with me, but I would also point him to this government's record during the pandemic. And we very much saw those particular services as needing support, and we followed that up with action. But I thank him for his very helpful suggestion, which has gone down well with my colleague.
Paul Plumfield.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Sunshine Preschool, which serves families on some of the lowest incomes in my constituency, is facing closure. Several other constituents have written to me as their children have had their nursery places withdrawn due to staff shortages and funding problems, and clearly this is a national problem. It's not a question, as the government seems to think, of ratios of staff to children, but the failure of funded early learning rates to keep up with costs. So can we have a debate on the crisis in childcare to urge ministers to bring forward proper support for this vital social provision, which is so important not only to parents, but to supporting economic growth?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right. These are incredibly important services for the children themselves and their development, and also to support families, but they are absolutely critical to enable people to remain in work and to progress through work. I shall certainly raise this issue. I know it is a matter that is a concern across the House with the Department for Education, and I also know that the work the government has been doing on early years to take a more holistic approach to all of this and make sure it's doing what parents really need it to do will also, the colleagues involved in that will also want to hear the Honourable Gentleman's remarks.
Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I join with my honourable friend, the member for Harrow, in wishing all members of the Hindu community in Warrington South a very happy Diwali. I recently met with many members of that community who expressed concerns about recent events in the Midlands. Can the Leader assure my constituents that the safety of all communities is a priority for this government and they should enjoy in their community the Festival of Light?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this. I do join with the remarks that he made, and especially to all those in his constituency.
Clive Efford.
My constituents are really concerned about cuts to their train services that have been allowed under powers that were introduced during COVID. The Secretary of State has allowed South Eastern Trains to make major alterations to its timetable using those powers, even though we are out of COVID now. So can we have a statement from the Secretary of State to explain why these powers have been allowed to be abused in this way and why my constituents are losing train services?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for his remarks. My right honourable friend will have heard them, but I will formally follow up with the department.
Benjamin O'Hara.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to draw the Leader of the House attention, indeed the whole House attention, to Early Day Motion 480, which was published this morning. It congratulates Dunoon Grammar School, which yesterday was awarded the 2022 World's Best School Prize in the Community Collaboration category. I hope to arrange a visit to this Parliament very soon from the school, but before that, would the Leader join me in sending her congratulations to Head Teacher David Mitchell, his staff and all the pupils of Dunoon Grammar School on this remarkable achievement, which you can imagine is a source of huge pride for the town, indeed everyone in Argyll and Bute, and is a real triumph for Scottish education.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm going to enter into the spirit of his question and not comment in depth about the SNP's track record in education. But what a wonderful achievement, and I do send my congratulations to David Mitchell, all his staff and pupils, and I hope they will celebrate.
Patrick Grady.
Given the Prime Minister's announcement that she intends to stand down, I wonder how wise it is to proceed with much of the business that the Leader of the House has announced for next week, not least the retained European Law Revocation and Reform Bill. It is of massive constitutional significance. It would enact a huge power grab from both this place and the devolved administrations. Given that the bill that created retained EU law, the European Withdrawal Act, was subject to 8 days of scrutiny on the floor of this House in committee of the whole House, can, if she is able to make any kind of guarantee whatsoever about the future of the government, given the complete chaos that is now engulfing the Conservative Party, will that bill be subject to scrutiny by a committee of the whole House and not just by a public bill committee?
Very important bill which will modernise the statute book, and I would say to the honourable gentleman with regard to other matters, I am going to keep calm and carry
to wish all of my constituents getting ready to celebrate next week a very happy Diwali. Can I ask the Leader of the House, she may or may not be aware that there's been a steep decline Diwali. Can I ask the Leader of the House, she may or may not be aware that there's been a steep decline of these languages for many British children's educational attainment, and crucially for our ability to maximise our trade and security relationships with India and other countries in South Asia. Could we have a debate in government time to explore the reasons for that decline and indeed how we might reverse it?
Well, I thank the honourable gentleman for raising that issue, and I will certainly make sure that the Department for Education has heard what he has said today. He will know very well how to secure a debate, and I thank him for raising the points.
Madam Fellows.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I wish I could take the Leader of the House's advice to keep calm and carry on, but in my role as SNP spokesperson on disabilities, I meet regularly with disabled organisations representing disabled people. This week in Parliament, muscular dystrophy had a drop-in, to which my young parliamentary assistant went, and he came back visibly shocked at the amount of electricity that one young person needed to use to stay alive. With the U-turn by the Chancellor, and with the news we have just received that the Leader of the Conservative Party has just stood down, will there be a statement on the 31st of October? I know it's not in the Leader's gift to tell me exactly, but if there is to be a statement by another Chancellor or the same one, I don't really care which, can we have some kind of guarantee that there will be extra help for people like this? Because it's absolutely imperative. It's life and death to people, and it's life and death to their carers as well.
Well, I thank the honourable lady for raising this because it affords me an opportunity to provide reassurance to people. This was raised last week as well, and I have already written to the Department for Health and other departments on this matter. We want to ensure that people are looked after and taken care of and supported throughout this winter. We're very aware of the additional costs that people with certain health conditions and disabilities are facing. I know this issue is being looked at, and I also want to assure her that I understand people want reassurance fast.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Conscious I'm in the honourable member for Strangford's slot, and although we wish to ask the Leader of the House if she wants to make any statement of intent in relation to her future candidacy for Leader of our party, I do want to focus on comments made by the honourable member for Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale in relation to the Global Replenishment Fund. When the government failed to make an announcement on the 21st of September of a pledge, that was really unusual. And now that we're hearing plans of the government to drop ODA spending even further, I do think we are really stepping back from our global commitments. So can the Leader of the House tell us when that announcement is likely to be made? Is there going to be positive news for the Global Replenishment Fund? And will there be time made for the House to scrutinise it?
Well, at the pledging conference where we did not make a detailed pledge, we did put on record very strongly our commitment to that. I think the issue was that a minister was not available to go, and so the pledge wasn't made. That was, from memory, my understanding. But I would say to the Honourable Lady, this is expected very shortly, and I would point her to our record, which is world-leading on this and other replenishment conferences.
I'd like to thank the Leader of the House for making her statement and responding to many questions. Points of order.
In the voting lobby last night. I don't think that
report these issues, tell people what you have seen, support victims to come forward and do that. I think the Speaker has got this absolutely right. I would refer you to the statements he has made. And as Leader of this House, if there is any member of my party that has behaved in an improper way, then I will condemn that. But what we need are facts. And I think the whole conduct of this House will be helpful if people stuck to the facts.
James Sunderland.
Mr Deputy Speaker, when members enter this privileged place, we are obliged to abide Last night, at least one photograph appeared in the national media purporting to show an alleged incident at the entrance to the No lobby. Could I so that photographs are not taken for disingenuous purposes and for political gain? Secondly, I seek your advice be brought to account.
Mr Speaker and the entire Deputy Speaker team absolutely deprecate any taking of photographs, whether they are in the voting law where they are forbidden. He's made a very good point. And of course, it's the responsibility of each and every one of us to behave better as role models to those outside who are looking in.
Mr Deputy Speaker, if I might.
Further to that point of order?
I'm very grateful to the honourable member because he told me that he was going to raise this matter earlier, and I want to be absolutely clear that I took a photograph and I did so knowing that I was breaking the rules of the House, the etiquette of the House certainly. I did so because I believed that the example that was being set when we are at the moment are trying to change the culture of bullying in Parliament was such that it was necessary to override the normal course of. But I apologise to the House for doing so. I think, however, it is very important that we understand that if 12 members were to stand around a member of staff in that way, they would probably end up being suspended from the House for a long period of time for bullying. We've only just started taking bullying seriously in this Parliament. There is actually, I would gently suggest, I'm not questioning what you just said, but there is a good argument to suggest that one of the rules that we've had for a very long time, that you don't take photographs and there's no photography, there's no filming indeed in the lobbies or in the adjacent areas, is now out of date. And actually, it might help us stop some of the bullying. I'm only suggesting it very gently, but it might actually stop some of the behaviour. Some of the behaviour changed in this House when this chamber was filmed.
Well said.
One is the apology, which the House has heard. The second one is any rule changes. Well, that's not for the Chair. That's for this House. And there is a procedure to do just that, and I'm sure the honourable member will make his views, well, he's just made them know a rule change. Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Irrespective of the issue that was raised by my honourable friend, we had photographers outside Parliament using very expensive photography equipment, taking photos of members of Parliament, which is a breach of the security aspect of this Parliament. And I hope that Mr Speaker and colleagues will take action to prevent this happening in the future.
I'm unaware of that, Mr Blackman, but he's now made that apparent. We do have, I will pass him the name of the person that he should now talk to, giving the evidence that he's just given. Now let's, on this momentous day in British politics, move on.
Is that what it is?
Another momentous day in British politics. We now come to the Select Committee statement. Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, representing the Committee of Public Accounts, will speak for up to 10 minutes, during which no interventions may be taken. At the conclusion of his statement, I will call members to put questions on the subject of the statement and call Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown to respond to these in turn. Can I emphasise that questions should be directed to Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown and not the relevant government minister. Interventions should be questions and should be brief. The front bench may take part in the questioning. I now call Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Mr Deputy Speaker, while momentous events are taking place elsewhere, may I thank you and the Backbench Business Committee for the opportunity to make a statement to the House on the 18th report of this session of the Public Accounts Committee on the government actions to combat waste crime. The PAC is an incredibly busy committee, holding 2 major sessions a week, examining the value for money of government projects, programmes and delivery. Our inquiries come from the extremely insightful reports created by the National Audit Office, and following our PAC hearings, the committee produces a report with recommendations to the government, which constitutionally normally has 2 months to respond. The PAC has this week published its report on the government actions to combat waste crime, highlighting our main concern with the government's strategy in combating waste crime, providing recommendations and urging the approach to be reconsidered so that waste crime is not effectively decriminalised. Despite an increase in the number of incidents of waste crime and the cost of dealing with it significantly increasing, the PAC found that DEFRA and the Environment Agency are only making, and I quote from the report, slow and piecemeal progress in implementing the 2018 resources and waste strategy, and DEFRA does not have an outlined delivery plan for achieving its admirable policy of eliminating waste crime by 2043. The government's 2018 resources and waste strategy set out the admirable goal of eliminating waste crime within 25 years and listed 14 actions to be taken. However, only 3 of these actions have been completed: establishing the Joint Unit for Waste Crime, making changes to the legislation to give the agency greater powers, and giving the agency access to police intelligence systems. DEFRA must increase the speed at which it implements this strategy, and the PAC has requested that the department provides the committee with an outline of its plan for achieving its 2043 goal by the end of this month, a quite tight timetable. We all know, Madam Deputy Speaker, the thoughtlessness of waste crime has hugely negative impact on people and the area around them and the economy. Waste crime varies tremendously from area to area. However, I'm certain of all members of this House have been contacted by constituents at some point and dealt with numerous cases of fly tipping. It is antisocial, polluting and costly crime that blights the countryside and our cities and properties across England and costs the economy over £1 billion a year, though that figure is likely to be an underestimate. The crime does not just include fly tipping, however, but illegal waste sites, breaches of waste permit conditions, breaches of exemption to the requirements for waste permits, and above all, illegal export of waste by the UK to developing countries that are ill-equipped to deal with the environment and often infinite consequences of that waste. Waste crime is not getting the local or national attention it needs to effectively tackle it. It's a crime that's greatly underreported. Only around a quarter of incidents are reported. The government and agency statistics are just not accurately capturing the true scale and impact of this crime, with local authorities not providing consistent reports on fly tipping and relying on the public to report crime. The PAC asks that DEFRA and the Environment Agency explore the full range of digital solutions to solve the issue of data weaknesses, such as satellite and drone technology. The government's digital waste tracking system, including new IT systems, have been described as being at the core of the government's strategy. However, it is still in development after 4 years. DEFRA's prototype is in the testing stages, and before it reaches the next stage of development, expected to be rolled out in 2024. This will be a big step forward in improving data and improving public reporting incidents, and swift and appropriate follow-up hopefully being implemented. The project has ambitious aims, and DEFRA is confident it can deliver, having successfully carried out an IT system which was put in place when we left the EU. But the PAC has investigated similar large-scale digital projects by other government departments before, and therefore asked DEFRA to write to the committee when the IT contract is let to confirm that it has happened and what is the plan for its implementation. The landfill tax has been successful in reducing the amount of waste sent to landfills and encouraging recycling, which has become an increasingly normal way of waste disposal for many households in recent years. However, the PAC reports that this tax has increased the incentive to commit waste crimes, which with HMRC slow to prosecute offenders. Indeed, it recently tried to prosecute an alleged offender in an Operation Nosedive. It cost a huge £3.5 million and yet ended up without it going to court. HMT and HMRC are currently reviewing the landfill tax, and they need to take into account the incentive that the current tax has in its present design in encouraging waste crime. The tax gap, which is the difference between the tax due and tax collected, landfill tax is one of the highest as a proportion of its size for all taxes. The Chief Executive, Jim Hara, the first permanent secretary at HMRC, assured the committee only this morning that the reason for this is that the scope has been widened to include illegal waste sites, which are difficult to track down. However, he did assure the committee that HMRC recognised the social and environmental harm caused by this. The reality is that the current system does little to deter people from committing waste crime, from organised criminals who are responsible for the majority of the incident, and they often perceive the fines, and I quote from our report, as a business expense. Fines are not high enough to discourage the crime, and even in the unlikely case that they end up in court, the penalties are not sufficient. DEFRA, the Environment Agency and HMRC need to work more closely together to develop a plan for making the enforcement more effective, speeding up the process, assessing the current sentencing guidelines, which must include not only higher fines, but custodial sentences for the most egregious cases. And DEFRA must, Madam Deputy Speaker, work more closely with local authorities. And while the department is developing the guidance, it is the local authorities who are responsible for cleaning up the waste on the land they control and investigating suspected perpetrators. Evidence from the National Farmers Union, NFU, said that better reporting and recording of waste crime on private land, and I quote, is urgently needed due to the substantial number of unrecorded incidents with fly tipping affecting 2/3 of farmers. The national framework needs to be cleared by DEFRA so that local authorities have clear guidance on tackling fly tipping and providing flexibility for responses, but overall good practice. Finally, as I mentioned at the start, waste crime does not just include fly tipping, but it also includes the terrible practice of illegally exporting waste abroad. Exact figures are unknown, but the Environmental Services Association estimates that around 400,000 tonnes of waste are illegally exported each year, costing our economy $42 million. Waste is being exported to countries that are unable to efficiently manage the volume and toxicity of waste safely, causing substantial and sometimes permanent social and economic and environmental harm. The Environment Agency recently secured a record £1.5 million fine. In this instance, a waste company was prevented from sending 16 25-tonne containers from being exported to India and Indonesia. However, a further 26 containers had already been illegally exported. So finally, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, just to go through the PAC recommendations. 1. For DEFRA to increase the impetus with which the resources and waste strategy is taken forward. By October 22, it should provide the committee with its outline plan for achieving the elimination of waste crime by 2043 and provide annual updates on progress in this plan. 2. DEFRA and the agency need to explore the full range of potential solutions to data weaknesses, including, for example, satellite technology, and ensure the successful delivery of existing initiatives to improve data. 3. DEFRA should work with HMT and HMRC to ensure the current review of landfill taxes takes into account incentives that the tax currently creates to commit waste crime. 4. DEFRA, the agency and HMRC should work with the relevant bodies within the criminal justice system to develop a plan for making enforcement more effective across the full spectrum of waste crimes. 5. DEFRA should work with local authorities to set a clear national framework for tackling fly tipping, setting an overall expectations and promoting good practice. 6. The agency should write to us within 6 weeks, setting out what actions would be required to enable it to understand the true scale of illegal waste exports and what further actions it could take to prevent them. 7th and lastly, DEFRA should write to the committee when the IT contract is let to confirm that it has happened and what the plan is for full implementation. Madam Deputy Speaker, waste crime is a large and costly problem that causes great angst to both those who are directly affected by waste ending up on their land, leaving them to clear it up, but also to the public, who deserve to be able to enjoy a clean and healthy towns and countryside. The PAC committee has clearly set out its concern how government is combating it. Most crucial is the lack of strategy or a plan for achieving its highly ambitious target of eliminating the waste plan by 2043. Madam Deputy Speaker, this could be a huge win for the government and the people of this country. I urge DEFRA to get on with it.
Kevan Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first of all thank the honourable gentleman for his statement and also thank the committee for an excellent report. Can I also thank the National Audit Office for their inquiry into Operation Nosedive, which was instigated by myself and the Right Honourable Member for Halton Price and Howden. What is depressing about the report is these are things that both of us have been raising for the last 10 years and no one has been listening. The actions that are outlined I support, but this is not a victimless crime. Tax has been avoided, criminals have got away with these crimes, and communities have been blighted. Can I urge the honourable gentleman and his committee to make sure they keep their finger on this subject? Because our experience, myself and the Right Honourable Member for Halton Price and Howden, is we've been at this for 10 years. The evidence is there what's going wrong, the government have just turned a blind eye and decriminalised basically waste crime. So without that pressure from his committee, can I say, I'm sure that this will just carry on.
Can I thank the Right Honourable Member, who's very experienced in this field and has been campaigning on it for a long time, quite rightly. We've made some fairly stringent recommendations in this report with some fairly tight timetables as to what the government has to do by when. I can assure him that if we don't see satisfactory progress, we will call DEFRA back to examine why our recommendations have not been properly implemented. So that is part, as he knows, of the PAC system. That we do have the ability to be able to call witnesses back and find out why they've not responded to our recommendations. And as he knows, as I said at the beginning of my report, they have 42 days in which to respond. And again, if we don't like the responses, we could follow that in writing, or again, call the witnesses back.
I thank Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown for presenting the statement from the Select Committee. And we now move on to presentation of Bill, Secretary Anne-Marie Trevelyan. Clark.
Transport Strikes Minimum Service Levels Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Thank you. We now come to the backbench.
For Bradford South for her work in helping secure it. I beg to move the motion that this House is concerned by the growing crisis in NHS dentistry, notes that 9 out of 10 dental practices in England do not accept new NHS and dental health across the country, calls on the government to take urgent steps to improve retention of NHS dentists and dental accessibility for patients, and further calls on the government to report to the House on its progress on the steps that it has taken to address the NHS dentistry crisis in 3 months' time. I also highlight petition number 564154 of the NHS dental contract. Madam Deputy Speaker, colleagues have been securing debates on the state of NHS dentistry for the past 2 years. This crisis has been brewing for a long time, and the situation can be likened to a house built on shallow and poor foundations, which has come crashing down with the earth. A slow death. In their monthly report for October, Healthwatch repeat that NHS dental care continues to be one of the main issues that they hear about from the public, who across the country are clamouring for NHS dentistry which is both affordable and accessible. In Suffolk, there are 70 dental practices with NHS contracts. Not one is taking on new patients. Locally, there has been some the Dental Design Studio were awarded a contract to deliver NHS dentistry for up to 8 years. However, very quickly, both practices were fully booked up and have had to turn away patients. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is a need for root and branch reform, and I shall now briefly set out those issues
of dental activity,
Does he share my disappointment at the statement made in the summer about how to resolve the situation based upon the consultation launched last year? And does he furthermore hope that UDAs will be expunged from all of this so that dentists can be properly rewarded for the job they do and thus return to the NHS?
I thank my honourable friend for that intervention. I agree wholeheartedly with him on that point, and I will come to it as I set out what I believe needs to be done to improve the situation, and I think that he and I are very much on the same page on that particular issue. I will address firstly, Madam Deputy Speaker, the issue of funding. There is a need to secure a long-term funding stream. In recent years, the NHS dental budget has not kept up with inflation and population growth. Since 2008, NHS dentistry has faced cuts with no parallel elsewhere in the NHS, and the British Dental Association state that it will take £880 million per annum to restore the service to 2010 levels. I acknowledge the budgetary challenges that the Chancellor faces, but the reform process is doomed from the start without an appropriate level of investment. There is a need for a protected budget, and any funding that is clawed back must be kept in dentistry. Secondly, a strategic approach should be adopted towards recruitment and retention, with a detailed workforce plan being put in place. I'll give way.
Very grateful to him for giving way and congratulate him and my honourable friend from Bradford South on securing this debate. It is a crisis. It's a crisis in South Manchester, as it is across the country trying to access NHS dentists. Now, there are highly trained dentists from abroad who can help. I've got some constituents who are trained at the dental faculty of the University of Hong Kong, which is in the top 3 faculties in the world, has an English curriculum, but they can't get registered. They can't access the licence exams. Now, I understand the government.
I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention there. He's come in at a very appropriate time, and he may well have been reading my speech, because that actually was the very next point I was going to come on to. What I was going to say is, in the short term, we need to be stepping up recruitment from abroad. Whilst the legislation tabled earlier this month to streamline the process of recognising overseas qualifications is welcome, this on its own will not address the problem, and I hope the Minister in his response will address this particular issue. In the longer term, we need to be improving dentistry training ourselves and ensuring that this is available throughout the country. And in this regard, the proposals being worked up by the University of East Anglia and the University of Suffolk are to be welcomed. Madam Deputy Speaker, thirdly, there is a need for a new NHS dental contract, as my honourable friend mentioned a minute or so ago. It is welcome that discussions have started on revising the contract, but there is a worry that the government are only looking at marginal changes when ultimately a completely new contract is required. At present, the NHS contract is driving dentists away from doing NHS work. Its target-based approach is soul-destroying for so many, and it needs to be replaced by an agreement that has prevention at its core. And Madam Deputy Speaker, that leads me on to the fourth and penultimate component of a new system of NHS dentistry: the public promotion of the importance of good oral health and looking after our teeth from the cradle to the grave. Denplan proposed that the government and the NHS should lead a public education campaign to emphasise the importance of oral health. There should be provision in the aforementioned new contract for dentists to go into schools, as well as into care and nursing homes. When economic conditions allow, let's be imaginative and exempt children's toothbrushes and toothpaste from VAT. This can embed good oral health care at an early stage of life. It is welcome that the Health and Care Act facilitates the rollout of water fluoridation projects, and the government should proactively work with water companies to ensure that this is universal. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is a need in NHS dentistry services. I acknowledge the hard work and great effort of those working at NHS England, but we do need to replace a system that is inaccessible, opaque and confusing. The Health and Care Act provides us with the means of doing this, and it is welcome that as from next April, many integrated care systems will be taking on responsibility for local NHS dentistry. This is the right approach, as good oral health care is essential for good general health and well-being, and it's inextricably linked to primary, mental and emergency care. It is vital that those involved in dentistry are represented on integrated care boards. Madam Deputy Speaker, across the country, there are a multitude of dental deserts. If we do nothing, if we apply the odd sticking plaster here and there, they will turn into one large Sahara. We owe it to those that we represent to ensure that this does not happen. This means that we need, as a matter of urgency, that blueprint plan for new NHS dentistry. It won't be delivered in one fell swoop, but we need to clearly lay down the route path and start taking meaningful strides down it. It is with this in mind that the motion calls on the government to embark on this journey and to report back on its progress in doing so in 3 months' time.
The question is, as on the order paper, as I'm sure colleagues will see, there is substantial interest in this debate. I don't want to put a time limit on, but I would suggest that contributions are confined to about 10 minutes. Sir George Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I too express my gratitude to the Backbench Business Committee for the opportunity for us to debate this important matter today. Now, on the 22nd of September, I raised the problem on behalf of people of Knowsley and in the Liverpool City region and the experience they are having with the Secretary of State during the statement on health that she made then. And I cited the BBC's research, which showed that, to use the Secretary of State's own term, the Liverpool City region is a dental desert, with not one dental practice taking on NHS patients. And in response, the Right Honourable Lady said that she had, and I quote, set out in the plan today what we are seeking to do with dentists. First of all, it is the role of the NHS, local NHS, the ICB, to take responsibility for such provision. And she said, I expect it to do so. Now, earlier this week, my office carried out a survey of dental practices in Knowsley in order to measure what, if any, progress had been made since that exchange. We found that of the 13 dental practices in Knowsley, it is still the case that none, I repeat, none, are accepting new NHS adult patients, and only 2 are accepting children under the age of 18. I'm bound to conclude, therefore, that there's been no progress made in the ensuing weeks. Also on the 22nd of September, I urged the Secretary of State to take measures in the short, medium and long term to address this disgraceful situation. Since then, the British Dental Association has pointed out, and I quote, the government must now show real ambition to bring dentistry back from the brink. While the new administration, goodness knows there'll be another new administration shortly, has placed dentistry as a top A, B, C, D priority, no new proposals have been made, and I quote, to halt the exodus from the NHS to care for patients. They point out, moreover, that the key issues of contract reform, chronic underfunding and growing oral inequalities